Welcome. I'm Frank Conklin with Panda Consulting, and this is Panda Consulting's ArcGIS Parcel Fabric workshop. Today is sort of a continuation of last month's workshop in which we talked about description-driven workflows. But today, what we're going to do is we're going to go and apply all these techniques that we went over before to how do you build a subdivision on here. All right, just sort of to let you know a couple little cleanup things. This will probably be a two-part workshop in which we will go and do the presentation, and then I'm going to open the mics up because I gave a presentation. I actually gave two presentations earlier this week regarding legal descriptions and how to actually interpret legal descriptions, and there was a lot of questions on there, and we didn't get to answer all of them. So I made a commitment. We're going to open this up and use this as an opportunity to handle some of those questions regarding my presentations Tuesday at the ESRI Land Records Meetup, and then yesterday at the California Cadastral Mappers Association. So let's go ahead and get started. One more thing, if you have any questions or comments during the presentation, please put them over in the chat window. Chris is moderating it, and he'll go and make sure that I'm aware of those questions, and so I don't just keep rolling along. All right, so let's go over real quickly the slides from last month's presentation. And basically the entire gist of this is that the type of legal description on the document determines the tools and the workflows that are used. It's not that these tools get used multiple times, but that it's really dependent upon what type of legal description is included in here as far as how you actually go and map out and what tools you actually use. So we started by talking about meets and bounds description. This is a type of description that is most familiar to most people. And then we're going to talk about aliquot and graphic or reference to other documents, or what's commonly called lot and block descriptions. All right. So a meets and bounds description looks something like this. It has basically a list of courses that are supposed to be run out, and those courses give you clues as far as where the actual property corners are supposed to be located. And those meets and bounds descriptions, there's a specific tool inside the ArcGIS that allows you to go and run out those courses and find out what the geometry of them actually composes. And it's all sorts of tools in there to go and figure out whether it closes, whether it doesn't close, that sort of thing. And then there's also another type of description called an aliquot description. An aliquot description, aliquot is a French word saying that means portion of. So in that description, you utilize tools that capture geometry of existing things and then allows you to go and build things off of those. And there's two different types of aliquot descriptions. One is a PLSS aliquot description. And when you're dealing with the public land survey system, the PLSS, when they talk about half, it really means half of distance, not half of area. It means half of distance. And then the other, there it is, the aliquot by distance. In this case, you're actually going and taking the whole thing and dividing it up. So let's see if we can go and go through here and do this and apply this to a subdivision. I'm working inside ArcGIS Parcel Fabric. So I'm going to start at the very beginning, and I'm not going to use this off of a plat. Rather, I'm going to construct it using tools. And construction allows me to go and use a whole series of tools above and beyond what you might have at the, when you're pulling this off of a plat. But some of this workflow is sort of completely compatible, and I'm doing it this way so I can show you as many tools as possible. All right, so as with all transactions inside the parcel fabric, we're going to start by creating a record. Again, a record is a polygon, and it's a feature in which all other things that we do reference this. It's an organizing feature. So let's go and call this just subdivision. All right, and this is a new subdivision that we're putting in, and we can put in the recording date if we want. Not critical, but we can put in the recording date and tell it to create that record. Now, again, with a record, everything that's created or deleted while we have an active record gets assigned the global ID of that record itself, so that everything relates back to the record polygon on here. So let's start. I'm going to do a subdivision on here. So the first thing I want to do is I want to go and start with a traverse. And the traverse tool allows you to go and build anything that is editable and buildable at this time. You will then see it listed here. And one of the things that occurred in 2.7, I think it was 2.7, not 2.8, is that you can actually not just build lines, but you can actually build polygons with the traverse. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do lines. So I'm going to tell it to go in and use subdivision lines as the type of tool that I'm actually going to use. So the first thing we do is we establish our starting point. In this case, I'm going to start down here. One of the first tools we talked about with a meets and bounds description is this ground to grid element, in that we can use this tool to go and adjust or rotate all of our bearings. And actually you could scale up your distances so that it's related to the data that you have here. For example, I'm going to go and turn this on now, and I'm going to go and enter the ground. I'm going to enter the bearing that's given on this hypothetical plat that I'm going to do. And I'm going to tell it that it's true north. It's 0 degrees in the first quadrant. So it's 0 degrees north to east. And then it says, go ahead and click here and click here to give me what that bearing is. And from that, it calculated that, in fact, there is a 1 degree, 19 minutes, 36 seconds offset between the bearings that I'm going to input and how it's actually going to map them out. So this ground to grid correction allows me to go and map things that have different bearing bases while maintaining the core information on them. So I've established my start point. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to start out, and this is 0 degrees north to east. All right, so I'm using a quadrant notation on here, and it's 300 feet on here. And as I hit enter, it goes and inputs that, creates the line. Again, one of the differences between ArcGIS Pro Traverse and ArcMap Traverse is that ArcMap Traverse creates a sketch, and the line's not created till you hit finish. In ArcGIS Pro, when you're using the Traverse, every line is automatically created. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go due east. So I'm putting in a deflection angle instead of putting in a new bearing. So 90 degrees to my previous bearing now makes it 90 degrees on north to east. And the subdivision is defined as being 800 feet long. Next one, I'm going to go due south again. That's 0 degrees, and it's in the southeast quadrant. And it's 300 feet. And then finally, I can go 90 degrees in the northwest quadrant, and that is 800 feet. When I input that, it will automatically tell me down on the bottom whether it's closed or not and what the accuracy is on there. In this case, I have finished this traverse and I'm done with it. So I can use the back button here and get off of this traverse. Now you'll note there's slight differences in here as far as where this is. It's all right. We're going to take care of it in a couple tools here. So now that I have my lines in here, and just sort of to show you, I can actually go and here I can go and say, let's turn everything except for what's actually coded with the global ID of this record. I turned everything else off by using this slider over here on the left side of this records. I can, this way I can focus on this here. So I now have all of the lines that I just created. And just sort of to show you, if I select these lines, and again, let's select these lines and only those lines. Let's do it an easier way. Go ahead.
May I ask a question?
Yes, you may.
Why did you choose to use the slider instead of clicking show only active?
You know, I wanted to show a different functionality than what you always show. B, I wanted to show there is that option to go and not just turn them all the way off, but maybe to go and dim them so it doesn't look quite as strong. When you click on the show only, it's a little glaring because all you see is just what you created there.
Right.
And it takes time to go and refresh it, because what's actually happening, and this is sort of a little inside, you know, this is how the sausage is made. When you click on the show only active, what it actually does is it goes to every single layer in your table of contents and applies a definition query to say, only show those features that have the global ID for the active record. So this actually takes a little bit of time to go and enable, whereas this is just applying a display on the rest of that. So there's some slight differences there, but again, it's 6 of one, half of a dozen. So I could go and say, go ahead and only show me my active records on here. And just to prove it, if I go to my lines or any other feature class in here and go to definition query, I suddenly have a query that says created by record is equal to the global ID of that record that I'm working on right now. So just again, a little inside the ballpark elements as far as how this actually works. So I'm only showing my active record. I've got them selected. When I go to my attributes, again, just to verify this, I will see on here, created by records here. This created by record actually includes this global ID. And when I go down through these, you will all see that they are all exactly the same. It's all coding them to the global ID of that polygon for that record that I'm creating right now. All right, so now my next step is to go and take these lines and determine whether or not they form a closed polygon. So I will create these seeds. These seeds are temporary. These seeds are temporary polygons. They're sort of seed polygons in here. And it will create a seed polygon for every closed set of lines that you have, as long as they are all created by that same record. Okay. So Chris, I popped up and I saw that Rebecca said, would you create and apply a plan at this stage here too, like in ArcMap? Actually, Rebecca, the record is exactly like the plan in ArcMap. So before I started, I actually created this record/plan so that everything is tied to it. Inside of ArcGIS Parcel Fabric, everything has a record or a plan, whatever terminology you want to use on it. But the record is comparable to the plan in ArcMap. All right, so I've created a seed, and that seed also has the same global ID as the record. My next step is to go ahead and build my active record, so it will take and analyze everything that's coded with that global ID and see if there's seeds. And if there are seeds, it will go and build them out and create individual polygons on them. And when I go to my subdivision polygon, I now have selected a polygon, and I'm just going to call this and populate it. And this is a polygon, so it gets some symbology on there. All right. So I now have created a polygon. However, if I look at this, I'm not done. That I would assume to be on the same line because I used my ground to grid. But when I go over here, there's a difference between where the corners were or are as a result of putting in and building that traverse and where the adjacent property actually is. I'm going to use my tool now, going to use my Align Parcels tool to go and analyze this. And I'm going to use my active record on here. What this tool does is it takes the active record, the features of the active record, and it's going to go and put a buffer area around it. And you tell it how far that tolerance, that buffer area is. And now it's going to go and analyze to see whether there's other points in that same area. So I'm going to tell it an anchor point to tell it this one is fixed. All right, that's fixed. And now I can tell it, go ahead and generate links to other adjacent corners and determine how much all of them will move. When I go in here and look at this, it will show me that, in fact, by the way, the blue dash is here because of result of this show preview. It will show me that this corner is going to come down to here, and that this corner here is going to come down to here. So it's in essence the same as the ArcMap Parcel Fabrics join. It allows you to go and do this. Now let me go and tell you about that. This tool actually does two things. It goes and moves these points using the ArcGIS Pro transform tool, but it also, as we move down here, there's also this point to edge snapping on here. A lot of people, when they first start doing this in ArcGIS Pro, they forget about this and leave it at the default of 1. The reality is, if you have an adjacent point, if you have another corner that comes over here, you want to make sure that that corner also is coincident with this new boundary that's being adjusted. So that what I suggest is that whatever your tolerance is up on the top, make the bottom the same tolerance. This way it will go in and search out within that tolerance and find everything and make sure that it matches your new location on there. All right. Any questions yet, Chris?
Yes, Matt has a question. What if you're more confident in your new points? Can you snap the old points to the new ones instead?
Matt, thank you. And so just to sort of clarify, what actually gets snapped? Whatever is being shown as selected right now gets snapped to whatever is not selected. And you'll see up on the top here, right now I have got my active record. Those things that I just did, I'm going to adjust them to my existing data. But as Matt says, if my existing data is more accurate, or excuse me, is less accurate, and I want to snap my old data to the new, what I can do is I can toggle and let it go and select everything else. So it now has all these adjoining parcels and any other lines. The road right away polygon is what it's also connected up. So I can toggle back and forth between the traverse and the parcels that I just created, or I can go and say, well, no, they're more accurate. Adjust the old to the new. So this, the top here says new gets adjusted to fit the old. And when you toggle them, the old gets adjusted to the new. Will that toggle select features that are not visible? That's a good question. This is actually using, I've not tried that, Keith. This is actually using topology for this, and it's actually moving points. And then those points, when they get moved, they're also moving the lines and the polygons that are built using standard parcel fabric topology. That's a good question. I haven't tried that yet, Keith. We'll have to try that sometime. All right. So now, once I create the anchor, once I create and generate these links, by the way, if the links aren't automatically generated, you can always go and interactively delete, or you can add your own links interactively. It's a slightly different, we go over here, it's a slightly different type of symbology when you do that. It will tell you whether you digitized them or whether you generated them. All right, here. Chris, like align features, doesn't the feature need to be turned on to be affected? I think you were right. I think it does need to be turned on to be impacted on there for it to work. Yes, matter of fact, you are correct. So that in this case, I have my PLSS layers completely turned off. It won't change anything about the PLSS because it's turned off. So it's not selectable. Thank you, Chris. Good catch on that. All right.
No
So
problem.
let me go in and do this alignment now. Again, this align button will not become active until you have created some links and you have an anchor point in there. So now I have gone and told it to go ahead and align this. Let's get off of this. Let's undo that and show that it has in fact aligned them up and made sure that they are all correct in there. All right. So I've aligned this subdivision polygon, the subdivision boundary to my current parcels. And I did it this way for a reason. I wanted to make sure that I could show you how I could still carry through that original ground to grid correction all the way through this. My next step is just, for me, the workflow, clean out the parcels, clip it out from those parcels that are underneath it. So again, I'm going to use this shortcut and say, select my current record. And in fact, the reality is with clip, come on, with clip, you really only need the polygon to do a clip. So now let me go and do a clip, and it's going to, I have an option. I can say, go ahead and actually identify what I want to clip. And if I click on this here, it will go and select everything that touches this line, this polygon boundary. In this case, I have this one that's going to get clipped, this one that's going to get clipped, and this one that's going to get clipped. The reality is I only want to clip this one out of everything else. I just want to clip that out. The lines and everything are already set. They already have dimensions on them. I'm only going to clip that out. Let's go ahead and clip it. If I turn on my historic, you'll actually see there's now a historic parcel there. That was the old original parcel. By the way, that historic parcel also gets the global ID for that record that says that this is the record that retired that parcel. All right, got the subdivision in here. It's in place. I'm now ready to start building this subdivision from this point forward. My next step, and I'm going to use the same record. I'm going to make sure it goes and generates it all the way through this record. My next step is to go and have this selected and say, copy lines to. And in this case, I want to copy them to my conveyance division. And when I do that, I have this option to say, well, only show me the lines for my current record, which I highly recommend, even though it does take a little bit of time, and preserve attributes on here. This one, I can turn that off and say, don't preserve attributes on here. So now it's going to go and take those subdivision lines and copy them into the conveyance division layer. Now, if I note a couple things that happened here. One is it actually still has the subdivision lines being displayed, subdivision polygon. So from my workflow, I don't want to see the subdivisions anymore. I have everything I need from them. So I will turn off my subdivision layer. I now only have my conveyance division layer. And just sort of to show you, when I go in here and select these things, I have conveyance division lines and I have a conveyance division seed. I'm actually going to take this and delete it. I don't want to see about that because I know it actually falls right on the line that I want to be drawing it. So I'm not going to go and pay much attention to it. All right. My next step is, once I have these lines, I can now start going and dividing this thing up into my subdivision, into the various components of my subdivision. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and take this line and do a division on the line. In this case, I know that I have to make two different divisions. I'm going to do it on distances, and I'm going to do it from the start of the line. And I'm going to go and do multiple varying distances on here. So the first one is going to be 25 feet. I'm going to hit enter, and then it's going to be 30 feet, and then another 30 feet here. And I can tell it to go ahead and divide this. If I knew what this remainder was here, I could actually input that in here, and it says 215, and I could tell it to distribute the remaining length proportionally. When you are building the plat, you want to go and make sure, again, those of us that have listened to my presentations over the last couple of days, what I'm doing is I'm building a simultaneous conveyance so that all of the distances get a proportionate share of any overages or shortages. In this case, there is none, but if there were, I would fill in that last one. I would fill in 215, enter, and I would tell it to go and distribute it proportionally to make sure that if there was a difference, they would each get a proportionate share of that. So let me go and hit divide now. I now have divided that line, and if you look, you can actually see there they are. Note my bearing is the original plat bearing that I had on here, due north. It was not the actual bearing of that right of way, which was about 1 degree off in there. All right. So that's over at that side. On this side, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and remove this, and I'm just going to split this. But instead of from the start here, I'm going to split it from the bottom. And I know that there's an intersection here about 107 feet up. And
Frank, Keith has another question. Would
Yes,
your
sir,
COGO
Keith.
still show entered values if a remainder was distributed?
Let us go and see. Entered values, because I did the entered values on here. I actually entered them. So if I had not done that 215, and we'll test it on this one here. We go on this one here, go to do modify. We're going for a distance on here. And only one distance. 107. And why is it? Okay, 107 here. Why is this not here? All right. And if I do a divide now on here, note, let's go over here. On the one that I actually entered, it says 107. On the one that I did not enter, it did not calculate the value, and it did not say whether or not it was entered or anything, because it did not retain any COGO attribution on there, even though there was attribution initially. So if you want to make sure you maintain this, make sure that you populate it all the way and just tell it to distribute it and handle it that way. All right. Next, I'm going to go to Traverse because I'm going to actually build out the road center line running through here. And I'm going to do that using connection lines. Connection lines, you're going to see, they're used to build elements in here, build the construction, but they are not evaluated as far as creating seeds or creating the polygons. They can be used for things like road center lines. They can be used for meander lines. Again, they are not evaluated when you go and create seeds. So in here, I'm going to go and start here, which is the center line of this road. Note, it automatically remembers that I have set that I have toggled on that ground to grid. So when I'm inputting this, this should be correctly inputting all of these values. So I'm going to go 90 degrees north to east, and I'm going to go 150 feet on here. And then I'm going to go to a curve. This is going to curve to the left. It's going to have a 150-foot radius on it. So there's a shortcut here. There's a couple ways I can note what this curve is. I can tell it the chord bearing if that appears on the plat, or I can tell it a shortcut and it says this curve is supposed to be tangent to the previous line. And when I do that, I'm going to hit the asterisk, which is over the 8, over the number 8 on your keyboard. And that means that this is actually going to note that this curve that I'm going to build is tangent to that previous line. I'm then going to type in 0 for the distance. And then this is going to be a negative 150 feet radius, negative being to the left side of my line versus to the right side, which is positive. And then you'll note I have changed on here. By default, this has the arc length on here, and it's looking for the arc length parameter. I want to do things. I'm a surveyor. I want to do it a little bit more precise. I always use the delta angle for my curves inside of a subdivision. Delta angles are only rounded down to the 10th of a second, whereas chord distances are rounded to the nearest 100th of a foot. Arc length is rounded to the nearest 100th of a foot. So this is 22 degrees and 30 minutes here. So when I go and put it in there, note it will store, I put the delta angle in, but it actually calculated and labeled this using the arc length here. So on here now, I can use that little secret again and say, now I'm doing a reverse curve, and I hit enter. It automatically calculates my chord bearing there. I can hit 0 for this, and now I'm going 150 feet in the other direction. I'm going to the right, and I'm going to do 22 degrees and 30 minutes on here, and input the curve. Note, it gives me the tangent bearing coming out. This is a great way to check to see whether or not you have exactly what's needed on here. This is the tangent length coming out, and it will tell you whether or not it's correct by what appears on the plat. All right. So now I'm going to go 535.06 feet, and it will appear down there, and it looks like I made my break at the wrong place. It makes my break and put it all the way down there. So when I go in here, I will note, oh, it actually didn't intersect this. How can I get it to intersect on here? I'm going to go and extend this here. I'm going to do the extend trim. Where are we here? Extend trim. Before I go here, I want to note this line. What is this line? 535.06. So when I go to do an extend trim, again, I can extend trim and allow it to trim this. And I can also tell it to either recalculate the COGO or not recalculate the COGO, depending upon whether that was in fact shown on the plat or not. In this case, I'm going to say don't recalc COGO and extend it to there. We're good? No questions? All right. Unfortunately, it does not necessarily take and move that vertex over to the line. It rather extends the line. So there's actually another vertex in there. But we can't have everything, right? All right, now that I have the road in here, the road center line in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and take and select that road center line, and I'm going to parallel it out. Again, I'm going to go to copy parallel here. And I'm going to go and tell it that I want to copy it onto the conveyance division lines. And I want to do it to 30 feet out. I want to create separate and discrete features here. I don't want this to be a polyline. Copy it all the way out, 30 feet, one time on both sides, and remove any self-intersecting such. There's my road right-of-way. But if I look in here, actually that didn't it? All right. That looks like it came pretty close. Looks like I won't have to use extend trim on this either. All right. So I now have my road right-of-way built in here also. Note I have not split this line. I have not split this line at all when I'm doing this. Any questions yet? I see Keith has got, would your COGO still show entered lines if there was remainder? Okay, got it. I already got it. Okay. All right. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and select this top line, and I'm going to divide it up. I'm going to divide it up for the lots that appear through here. So I'm going to go to divide. And again, I'm going to go to distance. And because I want this to be calculated, I'm going to input each of those. Well, it's actually, I can do this a couple ways. I can go in here and do this 100, 100, 100, 100, 100, 100, 100, 100, 100. And then I can see that I have 0 here and just say distribute and make sure it goes and does that. There's also other ways to do this. I could have told it to do a repeating number, equal distances, and repeat that. Input it one time and said repeat that 8 times. Or I could do it this way. Or I could have calculated it into equal parts. In this case, I'm going to do this. I know what the actual results are. So now when I go in here and look at the attributes here, these are all 100 feet wide, and they all come in as being entered as far as the COGO type. Still good with this, right? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and enter. I'm going to do some general construction a little bit differently. I'm going to go in here and not go to connection lines. I'm going to go down to conveyance division lines, go to COGO, and I'm going to tell it to, let's go right click and then go direction and distance. I want to go due south, and I'll go 175 feet down here. Did I say due south? Sorry, I wasn't paying attention on that.
You said due north.
Sorry. All right. Let's use traverse. What the heck? We use the traverse to create this one. Here it is. Due south. 475 feet. That's good. Oh, I also did the wrong thing. I created it as a connection line. If I want to go in, I can go and redo this, or if I want, I could copy it, or let's cut it. Let's use the correct terminology, and let's paste it to my conveyance division lines. All right, and I don't need to go and move that one. Just now, I want to go and do a couple tricks here. I want to go and copy this and paste this again, this time to the conveyance. When I do that, it automatically shows up here, and I want to go and move this. I'm going to move it here. I'm doing this to show you a couple different options in here. So when I have move or rotate or any of these options, in order to change this snap angle or snap point, I can hold down my control key and click on the point on which I want that to be done. Now, I'm automatically going to, if you'll note, I have no topology turned on here. So when I go and move this, it's only going to move one on here. If I were to have my topology turned on, I'm going to do the same thing by doing a move with topology. I'm going to move it to here, by the way, and then I'm going to say move. And well, it didn't do it that time, did it? It did it to me earlier when I went to move this on here. So I could do that a couple of times. There's also a new thing in here called an array. From a parcel mapping standpoint, I wouldn't necessarily trust that. I want to go and make sure I get every single one of these snapped to that exact point. So I'm going to go and paste it. And I'm going to go and move that up here. Then I'm going to go and put it there. All right. And I know there are other ways to do this. And if I wanted to, I could go in and build them individually on here. I just want to show you as many techniques as possible with this on here. All right. My next step is I want to go in again, do an extend trim on this. Extend trim, tell it here and say allow it to be extended and trimmed on here. And as I go in here, I can tell it to trim it here or to extend it, extend it, extend it, extend it, extend it. All right. Any questions or anything yet?
Nothing right now.
Okay. All right. The next thing I want to do, because if I look at this, this is not broken. This is not broken at all. I can, in fact, let's do this. Let's see what happens if I go and tell it to create seeds right now from this. It will create the seeds. It does not require that these lines be individually broken. I could planarize them and create individual lines and dimension them that way. But it's up to you as far as building this, whether or not you want those lines to be broken. If you want the dimension, again, these dimensions will appear on the top, but if you want them to appear on the bottom, you would go ahead and planarize these lines. So let's go ahead and do the planarize. Let's select all of these lines and do a planarize on here. Planarize on here. And let's make sure. And let's see where I've got.
Make sure you only select the lines.
That's what I thought. I don't see where I have any polygons on here. I have connection lines on here. Here, all I have are lines.
If you right click on conveyance division layers
Over here, yeah,
in the planarize tool.
in the planarize tool.
Mhm.
I have lines on here. What else do I have on here?
Well, you only want to planarize the conveyance division layer lines, right?
You're
There you
right.
go.
It won't do it across layers. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Chris.
no problem.
I wish I could say that was a setup, but that wasn't. All right, so I'm going to go and planarize these lines now, and it will go and planarize them all. All right, and there's a couple here. So they are now split out. So this is now split here, and this is split here, and this is split here. So they're all split now individually. Now that I've got that, let me go ahead and create my seeds on here. Now, again, when I create the seeds, what it does is it evaluates the lines that are associated with this record and determines whether or not they form a closed polygon. Right? However, it does not evaluate the connection lines on here. So let me go in, and now that I've got this, let me go and build these polygons for my conveyance divisions. Once it builds them, it actually will turn on everything else again. All right, it does show you that you've got those here. Let's go back here. Let's select everything that was associated with this. Includes my connection lines, includes my subdivision polygons. My connection lines, I don't care about those. Well, let me go and just go down to my conveyance divisions, polygons, and only select those. So that now all I have are my individual polygons on here. And I'm clicking on this, and I note this is actually not, this is a public right of way. When I come down further, this one here, this is actually open space, a general common element. I'll use it, I'll mark it as that. And then, so uncheck this one, or unselect this one, unselect this one. Everything else should be a lot. All right, so now I've got my lots actually built in here. The next thing I want to do is I want to go and number those lots. So I'm going to go to a tool called Sequential Numbering. And I'm going to tell it that I want to do the conveyance division polygons, put the information into the name field, and tell it that I want to go and format what number I'm building to just be one character. And I'm going to tell it that this is starting at 1, incrementing by 1, and then I draw a line, and every one of those that I go through will actually populate that those intersected polygons with that attribute. So to show you how this actually works, let me go and take it back to 1, and let me just put in here lot number for this. And let me go and sequence this again. And now you'll see it says lot 1, lot 2, lot 3, lot 4, and build all of those. All right. We're done with that. My next step is to go and take and build parcel polygons, tax parcel polygons on here. I basically have built all the conveyance division polygons I need. And what I want to do is I want to go and just select the tax parcel polygons. So I can do that by just selecting here, going here, and just going down to my conveyance division polygons, only selecting those and saying copy lines to my tax parcels. In this case, I might tell it to go ahead and preserve those and go over there and build tax parcels now. Once I've built my tax parcels, it becomes really easy. Let's let it display. Okay. So I can now go and build my tax parcels out of here because I did a copy lines too, which copies the lines and builds the seeds in there. I go and display everything. I now have a bunch of tax polygons on here. And I can use my sequential numbering again and do this on the tax polygon layer. And maybe put in whatever I want on here and then put where those should be. Starts with 1, increments by 1. Note I put here 3 individual hashtags. What that means is that the number that it populates will be padded on the left on here. All right. So now when I go in here, turn these off, make sure that this is labeling. There they are. So it actually is labeling. Let me get in here, zoom in a little bit. With padded 001, 002, 003, all the way through there. I then need to just go and attribute the road right of way and the common element. And I could have done it with the sequential if they were sequentially numbered. Often they are, often they're not. So I've used a bunch of different tools. The key to these are I use the ground to grid to go and make sure that the corrections occurred. I used the traverse tool to go and build my original traverse. I used my align parcels to make sure it fit together and determined whether or not I adjusted the existing or the new. Once I did that, I then used copy lines 2 to take those structures and create new things out of them. I then used divide, I used traverse, I used extend trim, I used copy, I used copy parallel. I then created seeds and built again, and I just build it sequentially. Do we have any questions on what I did here? Again, the tools were dependent upon how it was described out.
No questions in chat currently.
No questions. All right. So I had promised that we were going to stop and open this up for anyone who had any questions about the presentations I've made earlier this week, either at the Land Records Meetup or at the California Cadastral Mappers components. Are there any questions? Anybody want to talk about any of my discussion? By the way, there's one little trick here. See this here? That little one that I put in wrong? There is a tool in 2.8 that allows me to go and select corners and merge those corners together on here. and so that I can make that corner disappear. So any corners or excuse me, any questions on any of the previous discussions? My previous discussions regarded how you go and actually interpret the legal description, whether or not you use the bearings and distances and nothing else, whether you should have gaps and overlaps, or whether the bearings and distances are nothing more than guides to help you to get to where the actual corner is. Any discussion? Let's unmute everybody. Ask all to unmute. So you all have the ability to unmute yourselves. Do you have anybody who wants to talk about this? Mark, go ahead. Keith, I hear sound from yours. I am going to keep recording through this if we have questions, because I think other people may be interested in these questions.
In fact, this is Keith.
Hey, Keith.
So ahead. This whole subdivision, it seems to be a replat. Am I correct? A replat of the existing parcel.
Well, yeah. In certain jurisdictions, you would consider this a new plat that's just taking that single parcel and making that historic and then platting on top of it. So you could consider it a replat of a parcel. Yes.
Well, in regards to your previous presentations, wouldn't those four corners win?
Yeah, they could have. Again, it was just they could have won. It depends upon, and that's one of the things that I talked about is you need to know your data.
Well, the reason I ask is because when you noted that the topology would not affect non-visible layers, let's say the eastern boundary of that right of way is also a zoning boundary.
Yes,
and I would not want to leave that behind. So, I think the workflow we might follow would be to just you do construction within the subordinate parcel, even if it's not a true replat. Messing with the corners without seeing the additional parcel types could be a detriment.
So let's test this out here. So I have here single corner that's shared by multiple parcels, shared by conveyance divisions, a road, a lot, shared by the subdivision. Well, if I turn these off, all right, so that I just see it on one layer, I do have my cadastral topology on. If I go in here and select this parcel and then right click and say move this parcel, all right, since I do have topology on, I know it's going to go and keep those lines there. And then the question is, what happens if that point, that parcel point, is vertically coincident with other parcel points? What happens to the conveyance division line? It moved. What happens to the subdivision line? It moved. So to answer that question, if in fact we're talking about moving points, it does move things, even if they're turned off and not being displayed. So be aware of that when I go and make any of those adjustments, especially with the Align Parcels tool. It's actually initially it's using the transform tool, which is moving points. That's how it makes those transfers. So, by the way, I have to share you, Keith's a good friend of mine, and he doesn't like when I go and do that because suddenly it's like, well, why'd you do that? Because I'm constantly exposing the things where this does work the way we think it is, and it also doesn't work the way we think it does sometimes. So, all right. Keith, did I just really mess up? Or do you have a response to that?
No, yeah, that's great. That's how I expected to behave. That's how we needed to behave.
Right.
And I was concerned because the workflows that you used were the full-blown traverse, see, build. We were leaning towards scratch and snap, but if just to make sure our associated parcel types behave, this is good. Thank you.
Okay, good, good. But by the way, just sort of to those of us that are out there thinking, well, what about the PLSS? A couple things you want to make sure that your PLSS layers, and wonder where my points are here. I don't see my points in here. This is an old parcel fabric I have, but that your points, in fact, have control points which are defined that they will not be moving, because you don't want to go and move the PLSS when you're making adjustments on this. I can tell you that many of my clients, and I know Kim, you're here right now, we are taking the PLSS out of the cadastral parcel fabric and putting it into its own PLSS parcel fabric, so that we don't have a cadastral mapper go and make changes to the PLSS. It really doesn't have to be. Matter of fact, I would say shouldn't be in the cadastral parcel fabric. It's more of a reference than anything else. All right, anything else on here? What other questions do we have?
Yeah, Frank, this is Mark. I have a question. When you moved the point in the northwest corner of that subdivision far to the northeast, how would we get it back without having the ability to hit undo? Now, I know we can do align features to get the west line right, but how would we get the north line back?
The north line in here. Yeah, there's a couple of tools to do it. I can share with you what we at Panda do. At Panda, in every single parcel fabric that we build or that we work on, we have a separate scratch layer of what we call construction lines, lines that are just temporary that we use to construct everything else off of. And if in fact we did something like that and we wanted to realign it, what we will do is we will take those construction lines, those scratch lines, and build where those geometries should be, and then utilize the alignment tools in here. These alignment tools, let me go here. These alignment tools and these reshaping tools to go and move all that geometry back to where it should be. Unfortunately, and I think I know where Mark was heading with this, the ArcGIS parcel fabric does not contain that separate vector table that the ArcMap parcel fabric had, where it actually kept track of the movements of the points. And you could actually recall it and say, well, how much did this point move in the DX, DY? The ArcGIS parcel fabric does not have that. It doesn't have that complexity in there right now. So you can't rely upon that. You instead have to do it through standard construction on there. You would, in this case, we would build a line and we would tell it where to go and put that line. If there was something different, I mean, you could use something like align features, in which case, if maybe I wanted it to go here, and that should be the alignment of the north line of this right of way, I could always go and extend this out far enough so that I capture all of those lines in here and tell it to go and align it down to there and use that for it. Again, the align features tool looks at every point and every vertex and sort of recaptures and realigns, reshapes all of those features to match that line that you just drew. So let's go back here. It would go in and you could do that. So if you knew where you wanted to build it, Where you wanted to correct it again, you could use the Align Features tool. Individually, I might as well show you some more tools in here. I could use a Reshape tool. Okay, the Reshape tool allows me to go and reshape, and allows me to reshape without having a selection on here. Now, this could be dangerous if I tell it to go and do this without a selection. And I'm just going to draw some intersecting lines here, and you'll note it reshaped those polygons. Let's look at this here, that one. It reshaped this polygon. I didn't come through that one. That's why it didn't do that one. Let's go back here again. Let's do a reshape, and let's go through here so that it goes and builds all of those. It goes and reshapes all those. This is very powerful, but it's also very, very dangerous. I actually usually do not teach people that, only because it is very dangerous to go and do that. The reshape is a little bit easier, or excuse me, the Align Features a little bit easier to go and understand how to go and do it. Good questions. So, what other questions do we have? Anything else, or should I stop the recording? All right, let me
We
stop
don't have any other questions in chat. So
Okay, thank you. I'm going to stop the recording, and we'll continue talking. But on here, thank you all for attending. Thanks for attending, and we hope you enjoyed this workshop. If you have questions, would like some more details about anything we discussed during this workshop, or if you or anyone at your organization would like information about training, support, or ways in which we can help you with your GIS needs, please contact me at frank@pandaconsulting.com or call me at 561-691-3277, and we can discuss how we can help you with your needs.